welcome to Crossing Darkness, a podcast about the role-playing games set in the world of darkness and other tabletop games. We are broadcasting over Twitch every Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Time and are open to chatting with the fans during the show. This is Season 3, Episode 4, Werewolf the Apocalypse. I'm your host, Frozen Fallout, and my co-host is Moto Rory, who helped me create this podcast as well as a 40-person, four-table Gen Con event. How's it going, Moto?
Pretty good. Had a nice, relaxing weekend after a week of political turmoil here in the United States, which I pay attention to far too much, and I am ready to stop paying attention to it.
Yeah, definitely interesting times, and I like to be able to just kind of delve into the fantasy world of video games and role-playing games to escape all the insanity that's going on normally. But this game kind of delves right into the depths of insanity as well with Werewolf the Apocalypse. So, what is Werewolf the Apocalypse?
Oh, what is Werewolf the Apocalypse? Well, it's a role-playing game. Originally published in the 90s at some point by White Wolf Games, where you get to play a werewolf or a bunch of werewolves. And you get to go around and be eco-terrorists, which is the general idea of the game, right?
I would say, yeah, you're basically eco-terrorists that are causing um, havoc for, an evil organization. I think that the main enemy you can kind of boil it down to is Pentex and the Worm. But you also have some different ideas regarding that as well. But maybe we should explain what the Worm, the Weaver, and the Wild is, and kind of bring this back to why are werewolves eco-terrorists?
Okay, so in order to explain the Wild, Weaver, and Worm, you kind of have to understand that werewolves in this game are spiritual creatures, right? It's the mythos of the game kind of takes us out of the classical werewolf mythos of, just it's a disease like lycanthropy, like in D&D, and it turns it into an entire society of what are called shape changers. There are other types of shape changers, and maybe we'll do podcasts on those in the future. But werewolves grow up as spiritual beings. They have the power to shift into the Umbra, and if you don't know what the Umbra is, we'll get to that at some point. But spirit creatures and the spiritual health of the universe in general falls under three major purviews. There's the wild, which is chaotic creation, new ideas, spaces where new things come into being. Weaver is stasis, a building that's in a place for 100 years. The Weaver is protecting that. There's Weaver spirits, and then the Worm classically is supposed to be the spiritual equivalent of decay. It's supposed to be the types of spirits that eat away at the things that the Weaver has created over time. In the mythos of werewolf, at some point a very, very long time ago, the Weaver imprisons the Worm, and the Worm goes crazy. My personal interpretation of this, which I'm not sure everybody agrees with, is that the Weaver is basically preventing the Worm from doing its job, and so that's why the Worm gets corrupted in the mythos. And so most of the time, as werewolves and fighters for Gaia, which is the earth spirit, you fight the Worm, because the Worm is doing the most visible damage.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The focus at is fighting on the worm. Um, but you have a belief structure that they should also be fighting the Weaver. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now,
And in
would you
fact,
say would you say that humans are are creatures of the Weaver, though?
I think humans can be servants of all three, but it's actually kind of like which one happened first. Did humans serve the Weaver and imprison the worm, or did humans become the way we did because some sort of cosmological event where some sort of representation of the worm was actually imprisoned by the Weaver? It doesn't actually matter which one happened first. That's just where we are today. Um, Humans still come up with new ideas. That's wild. Spelled WYLD. And then the Weaver is the cultural aspect of sustaining things uh, while we're using them. I think philosophically, the idea of the worm being imprisoned is where humans try to maintain things for longer than they're supposed to. Like
Hmm.
we should, instead of having his, well, this is probably a bad example, but just the easiest one. But like historical buildings that serve no purpose other than, in some cases, educational, are just held in place. Uh, Specifically in the world of darkness, I think there's, if anybody's ever gone to like an older industrial part of a city where nobody's done any maintenance and nobody's kept up a building, like that's the philosophical consequence of this. It's the
Wouldn't that
worm
be in
is
the worm?
trying, yeah, the worm is constantly trying to like destroy this building through physical decay. People want to tear it down, all this other stuff, but in the world of darkness you just can't do it. There's just no way, because the Weaver is ascendant, the worm has very little power. And so in those places, worm creatures who have completely been uh, you know stripped of their power to actually destroy things and take them back into the non-existence that they're supposed to be, uh, they get corrupted. And that's the shit that werewolves fight, because in the process of doing the thing that they're supposed to be trying to do, they kill people and make people into Fomori, or toxic sludge, radiation, just like all these things that we consider to be terrible. Just that's where worm creatures thrive.
And there's an organization called Pentex that specifically does try to bring a more worm taint. That's a human organization that usually is considered to be filled with other tainted werewolves, the black spiral dancers, the vampires,
Yeah,
taint Nephandius mages and stuff like that that could be part of this organization. And I find it interesting that out of one of the big things with Werewolf is that it's a very combat heavy game. And it's more akin to the concepts of Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons crawls, and just you can just kind of go out and do this adventure. You guys can go out and just kill a whole bunch of things that are evil. There's a it's much easier with the Weaver, the Wild, the Worm. If you wanted to, as a GM in a player base, you can easily just boil it down to Worm evil, go destroy, and your group can just go out and destroy stuff. You can ignore all of the rituals and the beauty that is uh, werewolf in the world of darkness and all the rich history that exists in it, and just be like, we're a bunch of werewolves that go out and just destroy the worm, um, and be
yeah,
still playing within a very well within the idea of the game.
yeah. And we were talking about this earlier, where it's if you look at role playing games in general, like you kind of have to structure them as group events. Like it's very hard to, unless you're in a LARP situation, have a story about like individual werewolves all like doing their individual things. Uh, D&D is really good at creating the classical RPG experience where it's a group of people get together and using mostly combat abilities, they solve problems and gain experience and go on to do other things that are usually solving more problems with violence. And Werewolf basically sets out to create that as the base type of gameplay. Uh, so that's probably a good place to start talking about, as opposed to classical werewolf uh, mythos in media. And maybe you can explain this. Uh, how does the world of werewolf say uh, werewolf society exists?
So that's one thing that I always found really fascinating about Werewolf in general is that you can boil it down to they're just combat creatures that are eco-terrorists, but there's this huge, rich history that I've never seen done by any other historical concepts that we have or literature that we really have on werewolves. A lot of werewolf, at least from my experiences, which is not a huge amount actually with werewolf to be honest, but a lot of it all comes from, they're being controlled by vampires or they're just wild creatures that are just, out there killing stuff. Um, and if you get bitten by them, you get turned into a werewolf. Where, you know, White Wolf really took this and moved it completely differently and said, this is a family thing. This is a genetic thing. You have kinfolk, you have werewolves, and not everybody who is a descendant of a werewolf becomes a werewolf, but there's a possibility that down the line you could become a werewolf just for having a werewolf in your ancestry. Um, and you didn't, if you bit somebody, it didn't matter. You didn't, there was no transmission there. And it's all about this connection to Gaia, to Luna, and then they have the tribes, that the 13 different tribes that they break everything down into, and they create this really unique setting and history for werewolves that I feel is the most original, um, taking of the base concept of werewolf and just doing something extremely original while still, you know, borrowing a lot from, history and concepts that we have of history. So one of the things that
Yeah.
they did is they busted it down into 13 different tribes. So let's kind of go over those.
Well, actually, before we do that, I just want to expand on the thing, because if you're going to play a werewolf, the first place you start is how is a werewolf created? And you talked about kinfolk, so we're about to get into the tribes, but in theory, there are generally regular people who are kinfolk to one of these tribes. So if two kinfolk have a kid, there is a very low chance that that becomes a werewolf. Uh, if a kinfolk mates with an actual werewolf, uh, there's a higher chance that you become a werewolf, if you're that child. And then if two werewolves have a kid, that is automatically a metis, which is against the rules.
Hmm.
They are a deformed creature that is not so good. Uh, but yeah, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. So yeah, the 13 tribes.
All right, so 13 tribes. Let's go ahead and just delve into. We've got the Black Furies. Um, and this is your more. This is the only women are part of this, and they say save for a few metis males that that the Black Furies allow. I believe there's something about like they kill all the male.
I don't know entirely, but the idea is the Black Furies are from Greece. They're kind of the Athenian warriors of the werewolf world, and yes, they do. They kind of have that classical like men can't exist here, but yes, if there is a metis that is born to their tribe, uh, the male metis can kind of seek refuge there. I think the main part of that is that metis are uh, sterile; they can't have kids. So
Hmm.
there's kind of a um, I don't know. It kind of implies that the ideology is that a man who can still have children is the one that they want to keep out. Um, but yeah, so Black Furies are as a GM or a player, you can play them extremely anti-male if you want, but in general, you don't have to. It's more of a structure, and
Right, you can
they
do
are
the
tied
Wonder
to a
Woman
rotation.
type kind of Black
Yeah.
Fury, where she belongs to a group of all Amazonian women, but she's willing to go out and work with Superman or whatever. And you can kind of have the same kind of thing where, um, but they're traditionally like this warrior race of women, that goes all the way back to, like you said, I believe it was Greece, right?
Yeah, that's where they're ostensibly from. And actually, to just talk about that, in the original conception of werewolf, they tied a lot of these tribes to uh, physical regions, geographical regions in our world, and there has since been some uh, criticism of the there's an ethnocentrism throughout all of the World of Darkness books that people have criticized. Uh, they've tried to get away from that later, but this is definitely part of that. I mean, Wonder Woman, Athenian warrior, whoever came up with that was a product of post World War II America, and this was just kind of a continuation of that. So, I think if you play a Black Fury these days, uh, there are some other things to consider. But yeah, in
Oh yeah.
general, regionally based. But you can have a Black Fury uh, cairn anywhere in the world. That's just kind of how it went at some point.
Yep. So yeah, let's move on to the bone gnawers here. Because I really like the bone gnawers. Bone gnawers are kind of one of my favorite types. I haven't really actually done too much when I played um, werewolf. I didn't really do a whole bunch with the Black Furies, but I did play a lot of bone gnawers in my time. And
Yeah,
so this is your downtrodden junkyard dog werewolf. They're city dwellers a lot of the times. They're considered the omegas, or the concept of like they're the lowest of the low. So they can kind of do whatever they want. So they're able to buck tradition quite a bit. Um, and they have you know still a rich history of helping the homeless and being fighting against the followers of Set in Egypt. And they have a rich, strong history. It just is interesting that they're just this lowly. They like being the lowest because it lets them just completely buck all concepts of, they're the ones that get to say whatever they want.
yeah, and in fact, they are basically supernaturally cursed to be that way. Like if a bone gnawer comes into like a great amount of wealth, they will almost certainly lose it immediately. Um, yeah, bone gnawers are meant to be basically the poor people from any part of the world. It can be really fun to play them. It can be really fun to run them as NPCs because I mean they just show up in cities. It's them and glasswalkers, and it's kind of like any movie that's set in an urban environment where you're finding that there's the bone gnawers are going to be the street people,
Like
and
like um,
John Wick.
John Wick, like the guy from
Yeah.
John Wick, Morpheus in John Wick. I think he's a werewolf because and a bone gnawer because he took 1,000 cuts and he's still alive. Like,
Oh yeah,
I mean, he did get scarred, but werewolves can get scarred. So,
they can.
but yeah,
Um,
that's a really good example of what a really badass bone gnawer would be like.
yeah. Another thing about bone gnawers, along with glasswalkers, they were kind of the the tribe that moved along with human civilization. Uh, just wherever human civilization moved to in large numbers, bone gnawers went with them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how and they can be anywhere and of any race, of any descendancy, of anything, like it's except for that they're all supernaturally kind of poor.
Yeah, no, specifically so.
So let's go ahead and move on here to the Children of Gaia, and also of another favorite of mine, because these are kind of warrior race of werewolves. These are your kinder, gentler sect of werewolves, although have been known to be able to kick some major ass when the time is needed,
Yeah,
or
no,
pushed into a corner.
yeah. If you are born into the Children of Gaia, and in general, when you're a werewolf, you are born into a tribe. Although you can technically choose a different tribe at some point in your life. The Children of Gaia, uh, their totem or spirit kind of guide is unicorn, and unicorn is a peace spirit. So they're more diplomatic. Uh, they're dedicated to not fighting until it's like the last possible option. Uh, but if you look into the Children of Gaia, like if they ever do fight, oh man, they will absolutely fuck you up.
Yeah, they have some pretty interesting gifts that can kind of. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I'd have to go look it all up. But there's some interesting gift stuff that you can do, and that's one of the things that's interesting about all of this is that um, each one of these groups have their own kind of spirits that they work with that give them special powers, and but you can kind of access it from anybody. You can kind of get access across the way, but it costs more type kind of thing. Werewolf has like this interesting like you don't have to, a lot of things are like you have to have level 1, then you need level 2, then you need level 3, and you'll have level 1, 2, 3, and 4, as your powers, and each one is more powerful than the other, and they all kind of lead into each other. Where Werewolf has this kind of like jump around, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, rank 4 is definitely one is more powerful than the other, but you don't need to lead up to have level 1 of some power that goes all the way up to level 4. They're all distinct different kind of powers, and you can buy multiple level 4 when you start playing.
Yeah, and you. I'm not sure what I really wanted to say about that. I think you finished it.
But yeah, so anyways, I just find it interesting that there's a lot of cool powers that they kind of have that can be used if need be in a fight. Um,
Yeah. Oh, those are called gifts. They're generally taught to a werewolf by a spirit, and once they're taught to you, it's something that you have access to, uh, pretty much forever.
yeah, unless you piss off Gaia or the spirits, they can remove. But then you make pacts with worm spirits and stuff like that and get all your powers from the evil guys. Um, so let's go ahead and move on though to Fianna. So this is your Celtic and European kind of tradition guru. Um, So I'm not super familiar with the Fianna. I know that they're
Yeah.
um,
So so I always get Fianna and get a Fenris, which is actually the next one. So maybe we can just kind of combine it. Uh, this goes back to the Western centric kind of idea in World of Darkness. Uh, so Fianna are the British Isles. It's your Celtics, your Irish, your Scottish, your Welsh. There's probably like a dozen other terms that you could throw in there. Uh, so they're going to be more closely associated with the Fae, which is actually another game
oh
line called
yeah, yep,
Changeling.
yep.
Um, and then the way I wanted to describe them is actually the way I also want to describe Get a Fenris. They're the drinkers, uh, the poets. Although Get a Fenris is slightly different.
Well, the Geta
Um,
Fenris are more like killy humans, aren't they?
uh, Not so much human killing, but more like kind of the Viking mythos of uh, more warriors. So Fianna is more, I would say Fianna is elves, Get of Fenris are dwarves. Maybe that's maybe a better way to put it.
So that's
Uh,
an analogy that can be made. So you're saying?
it's an analogy that I made off the cuff that I think a lot of people would probably disagree with, but but yeah, Fianna is uh, I mean, the way it says it in the book, lore masters, warrior poets, and drinkers par excellence. Uh, Fiery passion and insights, and less charitably for stubbornness and venality. Um,
Oh, I'm thinking of the Red Talon or the one. I don't know. I don't know
yeah,
why I
no,
always get the Geta Fenris and the Red Talon always confuse me, but and there's no
oh,
reason why they should.
no, they really shouldn't. But yeah, so Fianna is your wolves from Ireland and the British Isles, and so all of the mythos that are associated with peoples of that area. I'm not sure. Are there even wolves in that area in our
I
world?
I have no idea. I mean, I imagine so. Like
There's probably a
they
few.
had tales of I don't know. Anyways, let's go ahead. So we talked a little bit about what we kind of know about the Get of Fenris. Once again, we also get that confused for some reason. Well, Mike had a really good reason why his gets confused. I have no reason. Um,
Well, it's because in our current world, uh, the mythoses of Northern Europe have all been smushed together by all of our current media, and so it's like, oh, the Celtics, the Norwegians, the Swedish. It's like, okay, yeah, no, to us it's all the same, but like classically they were very different. In fact, fought constantly. Uh,
and today they're different people. Like,
well, yeah, but they're all part of the European Union, kind of. Maybe not so much anymore.
anyways,
Uh,
so let's go on to the Glasswalkers here because the Glasswalkers I like a lot. These are ones that I've also played, which are these are your techno werewolves actually, and they work with
yeah,
the Weaver a lot and have a lot of gifts that they get from Weaver spirits actually.
yeah. And so to kind of expand on what I was talking about earlier, uh, the wild weaver worm kind of triad. Most werewolves associate themselves more with wild spirits, nature spirits, and such. But the glasswalkers more closely associate with weaver spirits. So technological things. Uh, they work with computers. And in fact, their history is really amazing because they're the ones that have had the most different names over the years.
Hmm.
Because they were the Iron Riders. Um,
Yeah, as humanity
I think-
evolved, they created different names for themselves that Like they were the warders of men, the city warders, or simply the wardens for a while in the Dark Ages.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the Wardens of Men. Yeah.
yep, the I can't pronounce that in the Renaissance. They changed their name again in the Victorian Age as the Iron Riders. Tetrasominins? No, I'm too stupid to be able to speak English, so it's,
I'll look it up later and tell you how to pronounce it.
here, I'll put it in chat for everybody to see. It's a word.
But yes, yeah, Tetrasomians.
Yes, so that's what they were in the Renaissance. But yeah, they're really cool. I like it. I like the concept behind them. They're like the more modern, but they're also not well. They're they're less liked by the other werewolves because they are more city folk. They're more involved in technology. They'll be on the digital web and do stuff on the digital
Yeah,
web. And a
yeah. I
lot of
mean,
other werewolves
they're
look at this and go, "What the heck are you doing?"
yeah, and in fact, Glasswalker cairns can be in like server rooms and shit. So
Right.
it's I mean, if I was gonna run a werewolf chronicle, I would probably have a lot of Glasswalkers. And in fact, the backstory for my character, for my Techno Mage character on Technogate, was running around with a uh, what is the grouping in Werewolf?
The cyber dogs.
Like, what's that?
Cyber dogs.
Well, no, it's so tribe and then it's not clan. Why can't I think of that name?
Auspice.
It's pack.
Pack.
I was part of a
Okay.
my techno mage character was part of a werewolf pack that was mostly glasswalkers, and we called ourselves the Diamond Dogs.
Yeah, so yeah, and they can have connections to certain things. Although the more and more that I get into the world of darkness, and I continue GMing for it, the more and more I see the need to create really strong veils of, like, unless you were directly involved with, and you might not have even told, you normally wouldn't have even told people, I think, about a lot of your experiences, just because it's so shrouded in um, mystery and danger of talking about such things. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's a
That's
it's a weird it's a weird world. I've definitely run games though, and Technogate currently is kind of at that level of where there is at least a good amount of connection. That there's they might not know what a tribe is or anything, but they know that werewolves exist, and your character interacting with them gives you a strong connection that explains where you get your werewolf lore instead of just I read it in a book or I learned it from a master.
yeah, yeah. And in fact, now that might be a good place to just mention the veil, which is so there's something in the werewolf mythos called the litany, which is basically the basic rules that werewolves are supposed to follow, and one of them is to always maintain the veil, which is similar to the masquerade in Vampire, where it's basically don't let people know werewolves exist. You got
Right.
to prevent that shit.
Yeah, every
Um,
group basically has a you can't let people know that we exist or bad things happen. And
yeah,
and theirs is
uh,
enforced actually pretty strongly by the concept of humans freak the hell out when they see a werewolf in full Krynos form.
yeah. Uh, and
And
so that's what I was going to say is werewolves kind of have this built in to their existence. When they show their true form, which is, I pronounce it Krynos, which is their big giant I'm a fucking werewolf form. uh, Humans in general go into something called the delirium, uh, in which case they completely either don't remember seeing a werewolf or they explain it away in whatever context makes most sense in their minds. So they're the veil is helped by that phenomenon.
Yeah, yeah, that supports, and then the community, the whole their whole society, their ritualistic, setup and stuff like that makes it you don't really talk. You don't want to let anybody know what the heck's going on here. You get in a lot of trouble. Um, so that takes us to the Red Talons, which I had mistaken, and when I had said that the Geta Fenris were human eaters, I was talking about the Red Talons. These guys are
Yeah.
well known for their hatred of humans. They're mostly Lupin in origin or Metis. They primarily. I'm not even sure about Metis. I know for a fact though they're primarily Lupin. There's very unlikely that you'll be anything other than Lupin if you choose a Red Talon, unless you got some fantastical story about how you're a Red Talon that was originally human.
So that might be a good place to explain the other part of being born a werewolf, right? So there are three basic types. There's Homid, Metis, and Lupus, right? So werewolves can switch all the way from human to Lupus, but you were born as one of them. If you are the child of a human mother, you're Homid. If you're the child of a wolf mother, you are a Lupus. And so, just to kind of complete the explanation, if you grow up as a Lupus, you grow up as a wolf, and then your first change, which is actually a big deal in the mythos, your first change is when you first change into your Krynos form, your big fuck off werewolf form. It's generally it's a rough day, to say the least. But that's the day. If you were born a Lupus, like, you are basically a wolf until you have that first change, and then you find out like you gain consciousness essentially, and now have the ability to switch all the way to human, which can be difficult for some people because they grew up a wolf, and so they don't know certain things. And then of course Metis is you're born or either from a human or from a wolf, but it's from the father is also a werewolf. And then you're born a Metis, usually kill your mother during the birth, and then just you basically stay in big fuck off werewolf form for your entire childhood. I don't know how there's so many Metis. I feel like it would be really, really rare.
I would think that it'd be pretty rare.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, it's just that I've encountered Metis in so many stories that it's like, oh man, they're just everywhere. It's like werewolves are just completely ignoring this shit.
Right.
But that's not the case. They're pretty rare. But anyway, so Red Talons, in general, that tribe is you are born a Lupus, and you stay Lupus your entire life. Some of the characters in the Mage Chronicle that my friend Charles ran for us a few years ago, there was a Lupus, and like he did a really amazing job of, when we met some Red Talons in the wilderness of Canada, they refused to go all the way to human in order to communicate with us, because we were a group of mages. But they so what's is that Hispo?
Yeah,
Glabro is the form in between human and big ass werewolf. And so it got all the way to Galabro so that it had like vocal cords that we could understand. but it refused to go into human.
You guys
Yeah,
couldn't just learn its language? What kind of mages are you?
yeah, we probably could have. But yeah, red talons, very anti-human, unless there's some weird circumstances.
All right, so next, and then a pretty heavy hatred on humans and just human society in general.
Yeah, yeah, very much.
So we've got the Shadow Lords that are next, and so these guys are stereotypically your bad guys, like that are still good guys, kind of thing. That they will do they kind of will do what's needed to be done in order to get things accomplished. They're they're known more for some of their connections to their you know let's see here there was a time during Europe where they became involved with a group of vampires called the Zamisi. Um,
I see. I'm
and
not familiar with that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about it, but yeah, it's a thing that had happened, um, that they got kind of involved with during, I think it's like the Dark Ages. But
That
any
sounds right.
case, there's these are your more Eastern European.
Yeah, so this is another one of the kind of regionally based ones. It's the Eastern Europeans. It's the I think in modern times, especially with the stuff that's been happening politically, I think we would know about it in terms of Ukraine. So, like in the Ukraine, you've got uh, your ethnic Russians, and then your other ethnic groups. I'm not super familiar with the different ones, but it's the people that live between the Western European nations and Russia proper. It's it's all them. Your Chechnya, Ukraine. Uh, yeah, that's pretty much all I know about it. But
Yeah,
they're known for being kind of ruthless, and I think this is one of the ones that is kind of accused of being um, a little teensy bit racist.
in the sense of like actual racism.
Yeah, like the the general ideas about that particular tribe might be derived from some negative racial stereotypes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, so the next thing that we've got is the Silent Striders, which I don't know too much about the Silent Striders, other than that they know that they kind of deal with the they can deal with the Dark Umbra a little bit, I believe, and they're from Egypt, I believe, and they fought the followers of Set quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. So Silent Striders are exiled from their homeland of Egypt due to a conflict with Set and the followers of Set. Um, because of their exile, they're known as being kind of nomadic. So you wouldn't necessarily find a Silent Strider like hanging out in a city for his entire life or her entire life. Uh, but like Silent Striders are great for characters that do a lot of traveling, show up out of nowhere, kind of thing. I think I used them pretty well in the Gen Con game. I think our my Silent Strider character for the werewolves was called Distant Rumble. And he was kind of like the what's the Gandalf trope. I call you uh, Gandalf Stormcrow because you only show up when shit's going down. Uh, but yeah, he was the guy that showed up and he's like, "Hey, shit's about to go down. I'm here to help."
Right.
Um, but yeah, they also have access to certain powers that allow them to move really, really fast. I cannot hear you.
And it was about here, unfortunately, that we started experiencing some technical difficulties. So we are just going to wrap it up at this point, but we will be continuing our conversation about Werewolf the Apocalypse in our next podcast next Sunday. So you can always catch us on Twitch to watch that live, or you can see it afterwards on YouTube or listen to it on our podcast on Podbean. Just want to give some shout outs here before we go to Midnight Express, Utility Muffin Labs, and Darker Days Radios for being really great podcasts that helped inspire us to want to make our own podcast here. Definitely want to give out shout outs to Onyx Path, White Wolf for creating these kind of crazy games here. And shout outs to Drive Through RPG for making some really great print on demand. Definitely check out the conventions like Gary Con, Midwinter, Origins, Gen Con, Gamehole Con. And thank you so much for watching. And we really hope to continue building this podcast and making it great. So thank you.